Welcome to the Cabin Culture Podcast, where we spend a little more time diving deeper into all the fun parts of cabin culture. I like to think of this as both the material and imagined expressions of how cabin lovers, dwellers, builders, and designers wish to live a more simple and authentic life. Mandy, welcome back.
Hi, thank you.
So for those of you who haven't listened, we interviewed Mandy a couple weeks ago and talked specifically about being a realtor and the process of buying land or a cabin. But today we're talking about something totally different. You do not have to have listened to that first one for this one to make sense, but of course it can't hurt. This one, we're going to talk specifically about your background in real estate investing and the kind of investments that you have now. Because I think a lot of people with cabins view that as part of their real estate portfolio or real estate investment. And you have a big history in this as an investor and also a real estate agent. So Let's start at the very beginning. Take us back to when, not even your first investment, but when do you remember first thinking about real estate as an investment or even just thinking about investing? Do you remember?
Yeah, I do. So I had remembered just being in the world of real estate by being an agent. I became an agent before I owned my first home. So I was already selling houses, but yeah, I was a renter because I was a new agent. And so I was just sort of seeing the, amazing investments that people were making and seeing them purchase something and then have equity and realizing that was, I don't know anything about stocks. It might be kind of funny to hear that. You'd think that I would know more. I literally know nothing about stocks at all.
Same.
Yep. But I saw from my profession people investing in real estate and then having equity, and that's just grown like crazy. We've seen that go absolutely off the charts in the 2020s. So I think this is circa 2013 that I got my real estate license, and I was renting this cute little apartment in South Portland. And before that, I think I had said, I had worked at a coffee shop and an independent record store. So I was sort of, early 20, mid 20 vibes. And then I saw these people investing and I was like, oh, that makes sense. I want to do that too. And then I started talking with loan officers because I had close connections with them because they were financing the transactions I was doing. And I remember them just even different ones and, just in the world, hearing about the sphere of things that it makes the most sense to buy your first property as a multi-unit because you buy it as a primary residence, which means you get a lower interest rate and you can put less down. Whereas if you already own a single family home and then you try to buy a multi-unit, you have to put a minimum of 20% down and you have a higher interest rate because it's an investor loan, not a primary residence loan.
Yep.
So,
which I did not realize until I went, because I bought a primary home first. And then when we invested in our first cabin, they gave me totally different requirements for what I put down. I was like, whoa, did not know this.
Yeah. You maybe even did it as a second home, which is a different type of thing too. It's a different loan type as well. But yeah, so I sort of knew that. And so I was like, okay, I can save up enough money to have a 3.5% down payment. And then I can purchase a multi-unit. I can live in it for a year and then I can buy a single family after that with a primary residence loan type. So for me, it was all about figuring out the different loan types and what I could capitalize on the most that made the most sense. And then that just sort of worked out for me. And then I found this oh man, my story is crazy. I don't know if I should tell the whole thing. I can, but I found this multi-unit in this area of Portland on Peninsula, which now has gone completely crazy. This area has totally blown up. It was sort of an industrial area of Portland for a little while, which then turned into the heart of the brewery scene. It's called East Bayside, and the nickname for it is Yeast Bayside because it's got so many breweries all around it. But at the time when I purchased it in 2016, so that's when I bought my first property, it was so sketchy. It was so sketchy. I remember I went to the building inspection and it was just me and my inspector, and the inspector and I had a good relationship. We had been working together for 3 years, so we had this repertoire with each other, and we show up and there's two guys like in the back of my building, like there's this little nook in the back of my building, and there were two dudes like leaning up against my building, like collapsed with needles in their arms. And it was sad, obviously, really terrible. Like addiction is terrible, but also really just kind of like terrifying. And I remember my inspector looked at me and he's like, I'm a single, like mid-20s girl. And he's like, Mandy, do you really want to buy this? Like, this is really sketchy. Like, this is really scary. And like, we had to call the cops and have them like,
Mhm.
taken to the hospital, and they were okay. They were ended up being fine. But it was just like, it was really crazy. And then inside, it was terrifying. It was like, the walls were covered with like nicotine smoke, like chain smoking for like, 20 years in there. So it was like it smelled so bad. It was so intense. It was so crazy.
Mandy, I think we
So
bought the same first house.
really?
I
That's
literally
funny.
we had to have people till up the yard in my house because it had been abandoned for so many years and people would do drugs in it, and every
Yeah.
time they would find needles upon needles upon
Yeah.
needles. Like, it was just in a bad area of Durham at the time,
Yes.
but it was what I could afford, right? So that
Yes.
was like,
Yeah.
to me, it was like, this is the only way I can buy a house, and I was a
Yeah.
single female in a neighborhood that wasn't super safe. I have lots of stories about
Yeah.
that. But and then
Yeah.
the inside, we had to
Same.
gut it down to the studs because there were like
Same.
piles of clothes left behind that we had to clean up. Like, it was
Yeah.
disgusting.
There's a picture I could send you of like us like during the demo before we started rebuilding, and it is insane. It's
Please send
absolutely
it to me. I'll put it in the YouTube version.
okay. Yeah, it was so crazy. So it was totally insane that I bought it. And now looking back, I like can't believe I had the balls to buy it. Like I really am like, wow, I just had no fear. It's just like,
Me
oh yeah,
too.
sure, I'll do this. Like, sure. And
Because you don't know yet.
you have no idea. And I figured it out. I had a couple contractors that I liked, and my dad helped me a little bit. And, we like figured I had some friends that moved in for a while and like gave them like dirt cheap rent for like, being there and helping out and not caring that it's like ugly or whatever,
So were you
So
living in it right away?
yeah, I mean part-time. Like I was sleeping there sometimes, but I still kept my apartment. I mean, technically it was my primary residence, so like yes, but while I was doing renovation, I was either like sleeping in another unit or like I hung on to my rental for just a little bit longer to go back and forth when I was like doing big demo and stuff. But then
Yep.
certainly once the demo was done and it was put together, so many mistakes were made, but it was my first renovation project, but put it back together and moved into it and then lived there for a little while. And then I bought a 16-acre property 30 minutes north with a 1790s farmhouse, which is where I am now. And now come here too. I kind of go back and forth. I'm kind of like I don't have like a place where I primarily rest my head. Like I sleep in Portland all the time. I still have a space for me there. That's my primary residence a lot of the time. And then sometimes I sleep here in the farmhouse, and then I have the venue in Shapley that I sleep at
Yep.
too. So yeah, I've got so many places, so many things, but it's
Okay,
cool.
do you mind if I ask financial questions about this? Because I do think both of us got into real estate investing at a younger age. And I think a lot of people are like, okay, how did you make that work like in your 20s? So how
Yeah.
much did you buy that first unit for?
Yeah, it's crazy. It was a 3-unit apartment building, and I paid $300,000 for it. And it
Okay.
just appraised last year at 950.
Wow. Okay. And did you get a construction loan to do all that work, or how
No.
did you afford the work? Did you have a savings account that you pulled from?
Um, no. I was like doing it paycheck to paycheck. Like, and in real estate, there's no guaranteed paycheck, like in my business. So it was just like,
Yeah.
like I would say one of the guys who did a large chunk of the renovating was my favorite lender at the time's husband. So there was like a friendship crossover there where like there were many times that I was like, hey, I have a closing coming up. I can pay you like once I once I get that check. Like
Mhm.
so sketchy, but he was fun. He knew I was good for it, but I just didn't
Yeah.
always have it like right when it was due or whatever. But yeah, I definitely like looking back at that now, it's like a little embarrassing to chat about, but it's part of the story, right? But it was
Yep.
so like rough in so many ways. And then since then I've obviously learned so much, which, just comes with experience.
Right. Okay, so another question, have you sold that house? Do you still own it?
No,
Because you said you just got it. Oh, you did sell it. What did you sell it
No,
for?
no, I still own it.
Oh, you still own it. Okay,
Yeah.
because you said you got it appraised recently. So the value has gone up a ton and you're renting, I'm assuming, all 3 units?
Yeah, so the top 2 units are Airbnbs, and then the bottom unit is a friend of mine and his lady. Oh, they're both friends of mine, but I energetically struggle sometimes. And this is maybe a side conversation. I don't know if you really want
Mhm.
to go there, but like I struggle with the Airbnb thing sometimes because the whole other narrative from the other side is like you're taking away
Yes.
housing for us
Mhm.
locals, and like I feel that and I believe that too, and it's really hard for me to juggle as a real estate agent who's like selling a lot of properties to out of staters and then seeing the rent prices be really high. I'm like, I struggle with that too. Cause before I got into real estate, I was a musician and, worked at a record store and like I am that person too. Like that is also
Yeah.
in me. So I've really struggled a lot with like, having the Airbnbs and then also feeling like I needed to like energetically walk the walk of how I think of like making sure that like we don't kick out all the cool people of Portland because every all of their apartments have been raised, the rent has been raised too
Yeah.
much or they've all turned into Airbnbs. So my tenants on my first floor, it's a large 2 bedroom. It's not fancy, but it's fine, and they pay $1,200 a month, and they've been paying that for many years. I have not raised their rent
A
at all.
really good price. Yeah.
Even put a washer dryer in the basement for them, and I didn't raise their rent, and my taxes went up like crazy over the last few years. I haven't raised their rent. So a 2 bedroom in Portland, like that size, it's about 1,000 square feet, goes for around like 2,600 a month.
Wow.
And they're paying 1,200, and I won't raise their rent. One, because they're very cool people, and he's an amazing local artist, musician, and he's part of the whole like why Portland is vibrant is because
Yeah.
he is so cool and there, and he couldn't afford a higher rent, or I shouldn't speak for him, but like I didn't want to charge him a crazy high rent.
Yep.
He's just a cool person, and also like having 2 Airbnbs above you isn't the most fun thing. Like having a mini hotel above you can be
Yeah.
frustrating, and they're very sweet and kind to my folks who come through. So that's sort of why I do it that way. So I keep the first floor, the long term tenants with the crazy cheap rent, and then the upstairs ones I rent out to guests. And then I have a
Okay.
space up well that's like private with its own entrance and its own bath, and that's where I sleep.
Okay. Do you manage the Airbnbs or do you have someone manage
Mhm.
them for you?
Yeah, I just
You
do
do
it
all of it.
myself. I know. It's
So you
crazy.
you don't clean them yourself. You have a
No,
cleaner.
no, I have a
Okay.
cleaner. I have an amazing
That would
cleaner.
be impossible.
Yeah, I have this amazing cleaner. He's like this like metal dude. He's like so rad. It's like the most unstereotypical cleaner. He like plays in like a death metal band, and he's so amazing. And he does such a good
Very
job.
on brand for you.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna ask more financial questions
Yeah.
because I really think people, like, wanna understand how this
Okay.
works, but feel free to say no if any of them are uncomfortable. What is your monthly mortgage payment? Because you bought it at 300, you put 20% down. What is your monthly mortgage payment for the whole unit?
No, I put 3.5% down.
Oh, you put
Yeah.
3.5%
Mhm.
down. Wow, okay. So that's, like, a very achievable place to
Yes,
start.
that's why it was my first property with a really low interest rate, low down payment and a primary residence interest rate. I ended up refinancing that property, and I took out like a couple 100,000 in equity. And with that, I purchased an island in Greenville, which is one of my favorite places in the world. It's this camp that I have that I don't rent out. It's just for myself and my family and my friends. It's the most magical place I've ever been. If anyone wants to go to a energetically beautiful place, Greenville, Maine is amazing. And so I refied Portland in order to be able to do that. So now I think I owe like 580 on it, and my
Okay,
mortgage is like 3,500 a month or 3,800 a month or
okay.
something.
And you make 1,200 off of the fuldtime
Mhm.
tenants. How much do you average monthly for the 2
Yeah,
short-term
I
rentals, do
don't
you
know.
know?
I'm sorry. Isn't that bad? I don't know.
That's okay.
Because also,
No,
how on Airbnb when you have because I also have the Airbnb in Florida, it doesn't itemize per.
I know. I do it manually every
I,
month so that I can look at the numbers for each
yeah, I
unit.
don't. I just don't even know because it's all in the
Yeah.
summer. It's really good. In the summer, I've been able to charge, and I think I'm even on the lower end. I charge like 300 or 350 a night. And in the winter, I charge like 125 a night, and even then, I have
Yeah.
so many vacancies. I think I have like 2 stays in February. Like it's
Isn't it crazy how much it varies? And, like, adjusting pricing, I try and tell people, like, if you wanna stay at Cozy Rock, like, spring is the time to
Yeah.
come because it's literally half the price of our summer rates, but there's only so much summer in
Yeah.
Maine that people it's so concentrated in those, like, 2.5 months
Yeah,
that
that's it. For those two, from like, June to, well, I would say from like June, mid June to November, it's pretty solid.
yeah,
And really it's like
yeah.
nonstop. I feel like lately, or like in the past year lately, and maybe it's, I don't know if it's the same. You're kind of a destination spot, so it's a little different. I feel like all of my guests are coming for a wedding. I am like
Oh, interesting.
constant, like I just got a booking earlier today for like June. They book, I have my calendar way open because I don't care. And like people are booking, and it's always like, hey, it's myself and one other couple. We're coming for a wedding in Portland. Like I am constantly hosting wedding guests.
I love those are my favorite. I don't do that at Cozy Rock a
Yeah.
lot, but it when I hosted in my house in Durham, those are my favorite guests because 'cause they're like, "I don't know this city. I didn't pick this
Right.
city." And I used to feel like it is my chance to sell you on
Right.
this city. Like, you got stuck here for a wedding, but you're gonna leave telling everyone how cool Durham is because 'cause I'm gonna send you to all the right
Yes. I love
spots.
that so much. That's awesome.
It just felt like there was so much opportunity with those people, and we'd get a lot of people who came in for, like,
Right.
conferences and stuff too, and it was, like, the same idea. You have to be here, but, like, why not make it into, like, a
Like,
real
let me
treat
show
while you're
you.
here?
Yeah. Yeah, I saw the booklet you
Yeah,
posted.
okay.
It was so incredible. I have a big booklet in my Airbnbs as well, but it's not as detailed as yours. But it does have this huge list of mostly all my favorite places to eat because I just love eating so much. So
Yeah,
I just like post
yeah,
all the food because Portland's such a foodie city. It's got so many amazing restaurants.
so much, and if you're there for a
Yeah.
wedding, your schedule is pretty planned, so the only thing you can really direct them towards is, like, what are you gonna do for breakfast that day? Let me send you to the best
Yeah.
breakfast spot, right? Like, yeah. Okay. So that was your first one. You still own it. It's still paying your mortgage. You're making some off of it. We don't know exactly how much. But this is the two pieces, though, of financial or of real estate investing that I think are interesting is like you're making some in that every month you're probably profiting a little
Yeah.
bit, right? So that's just like income. But then on the second side, the property is also appreciating. So
Right.
either that pays off when you eventually pay off the mortgage and then you make more monthly, or you sell the house and then you have a big influx of cash that you can reinvest or use or whatever. Or in your case, you can refi and then you can pull that equity. So you said it was worth like 300 when you bought it, or at
I
least that's
think.
what you paid
Yeah.
for it. And then the equity is 900. So you have almost $600,000 in equity that you've gained just with the market growing that you were then able to pull out of and invest
Something
in
else.
another
Yes.
property. Was that your second property? Was the
No.
island? What was your second? No, the
The part
farmhouse,
where
you
I am
said.
now is the second property.
And that was also a primary home because you were living there. Do you rent that one at all,
Mm,
or is that a primary home?
no. I built an in-law apartment in the back of it where my dad lives,
Okay.
but I don't
Okay.
anymore.
So,
Yeah.
okay. And then next was the island. What came next? Wasn't the
I
swan
think the
next?
swan was next.
Okay. Tell people about the swan. I follow it on social media, so I know a little bit about it.
The swan is right up the road from me. It's only 3 miles up the road. I named it the Swan Victorian. It is this old early 1900s Victorian, like gorgeous, huge 4,000 square foot property, really grand in its day, really eye catching. And the previous owners and probably the ones before that just really let it get in horrible disrepair. So, if you look back at the early images of it, if you go to the Instagram, it was so scary. Like I really should have capitalized on it for Halloween before I started fixing it up because it was like quintessential, like
Yes.
scary, haunted looking house. So I started renovating it. I bought it. So get this, I bought it in January of 2020.
Oh, right
Right
before.
before. I had like literally no idea it was coming. And then boom, and then it was like, "Oh my god." And then the cost of materials went psychotic, like the cost of like 2 by 4s and everything, like it was just so wild.
Was this like an intentional did you have an investing plan where you were like, "Okay, here's the next kind of property I wanna invest in," or because you're a real estate agent, did you just see this on the market and then you were like, "This looks like it could be a good investment?" How do you know when it's time to make that next step?
I don't know, I'm really not the best person to ask. Maybe I need to give myself more credit, but it's like kind of a gut thing, like a lot
Yeah.
of like, I mean, you should be talking to like investors who like have all the numbers and like I don't run numbers. I just look at it, and if the number, like, I just kind of like, I'm like, okay, if that feels affordable, or like I can carry that. I'm a lot like, I'm embarrassingly not professional about it, but yet I own 8 properties, and it's so something is
Okay, you're
working.
not alone. Yes, a lot of people do that, and I think you're still an interesting example because it's working for you. So I don't think there's a right or wrong way to do this. I think that's why I think it's interesting to talk to you about. I'm just curious, like how you knew, because the Swan was a big one. I remember seeing you announce it on Instagram and being like, "Man, what a cool project!" But how intimidating. How did she get to that place where like she could take on a project
Yeah.
like that?
At the time, I was working with the contractor that I had a good relationship with, and then eventually it sort of broke down and fell apart. So a lot of things happened with the Swan that ended up not working out so great. So that's kind of a good thing to share, that, you don't always come up on top. I think so. The Swan had a really low price tag. It was 99,000 for this big, stunning Victorian.
Wow.
I refinanced the farmhouse and was able to take out 100,000 in cash to purchase the Swan. So similar to how I did with the multi, although I did that after the first refinance I did was I refinanced this and took out money and bought the Swan in cash. And then I had some savings. The first thing I did was put a new roof on it because it was leaking and it was terrible. So that was like 35,000. And then I did a bunch of work inside with some really skilled contractors that I loved so much, but they were I only had them for a short amount of time. Like, they were going on to another project and then they left the state. So the time that I had with them was amazing, and they were so phenomenal, and the work that they did was so good. And then I met this other contractor, unfortunately, where the story really turned sour, and I signed a really well written contract with him that for 60,000 he was going to do the exterior, which was a really good price for how bad the exterior was and the size and the intensity of it. And then it was my mistake. And so I guess something big, if your listeners care, like, never pay a contractor in full before the job is done. It was the mistake that I made. I had given him just some money, and he was working really hard and it was looking really good. So I just was like flowing with it. It was like, okay. And so he would just like ask for, 5,000 like every couple days or whatever. And so I was just like, oh, here, I was like busy in my real estate business. So I was just like writing him checks. And then there was like a moment where I was like, God, I think I'm paying Keith. Like, I think I paid him a lot. Like, I should check in and like see how much I've given him. So I like go through my checkbook, and it turns out that I had given him like 57,000 of the 60, and the property hadn't even been painted yet, and the deck wasn't done, the porch wasn't done, and all this stuff. So I was like, oh my God, I had this huge freak out, and I like talked to him about it. I'm like, I just realized I almost paid you in full, and like, it's, you're not even close to done. And then he scrammed. He like completely disappeared. And
How did he handle that conversation? Did you think he was going to disappear? Or?
no, he was like, we'll get it done. We'll get it done. And he still convinced me to pay him the last 3 grand because it was at like 57,000. He's like, just leave a check for 3 grand on your door. I'll come over and pick it up. And with that, we'll finish up. And like, I'm in such an idiot. He came over, he picked up the last 3 grand, and I never saw him again. He never went back to the property. Like, he took that last of that money and was like, I'll be there on Monday, and then never heard from him again. A million texts and phone calls later, talking to the local police department. Like, I find out that there's really no recourse for contractors in Maine. In other states, it's a lot more strict, but in Maine, there's no protection for civilians, and you don't have to have a license to be a contractor. So anyone can be a contractor. And like, the attorney general doesn't really care about these cases. I spoke to many lawyers,
Wow.
and there was like, you can fight this, but you won't get anything. Like, I was just completely.
And then you're out the legal fees too. So it's like, why even
Yeah.
do that?
So it's horrible. It ended up being so terrible. So I did the math just recently. I think I have about like between like 225 and 250,000 into the Swan right now. And
Does that include the 99 that you bought it with?
mhm.
Okay, people should see pictures because that actually doesn't feel that bad for the size of this
Yeah, it's
house.
so cool. Like, I mean, it's a disaster inside. And then that same contractor stole all of the copper pipes in the basement. So my heating system doesn't work anymore because he like cut all my pipes and stole them all because there's like a minimal amount of money in copper piping. It's absolutely horrible. So the problem with it is that if it was in any other town or, like a town, pretty much any other town, the price tag would be a lot higher finished up. But in Richmond, there's just this weird thing in Richmond that, like, there's a beautiful mansion down the street that's like 10 times or 5 times the size of the Swan, and it just sold for like 425. Like, the real estate in Richmond has gorgeous Greek revivals and Victorians and these big, beautiful homes, but for some reason, the real estate's just super, super low. So the
Mhm.
cost for me to continue to hire contractors because I'm not talented enough to do the work myself puts me over my head of like if I then did just try to resell, which wasn't the original intention. I wanted to hang on to it and have all these like great grand, things. I was going to do Airbnbs and I was going to have my real estate office there and like maybe a cool like coffee shop or something. I had all these plans,
Yeah.
but then it was like sort of has fizzled quite a bit, especially since I bought the Golden Heart, which we can talk about after. Um,
Yeah.
so now I think I'm gonna probably sell this one. You hear it here first. I haven't said this like publicly at all, but I've been speaking with a friend of mine who she and I have very similar visions, and she and her family can do the work themselves. So like it does make sense for
Oh,
them. They only have to
that feels like a good project.
and she's been sending me all these ideas that they have for the rooms, and it's like the same vision, like, hand drawn murals and
Mm.
very Victorian vibes. So I mean, not to count my eggs before they hatch, I'm knocking on wood, but I hope that they end up wanting to purchase it because it would be great to pass it off to them and let them continue what I started but was unable to, execute.
Would you be able to recover the money that you put into
No,
it
I'd
by selling
sell it
it?
at a loss.
Yeah, okay. But at least it would get you out from it and make some of
Yeah.
that money
Yeah,
back.
I don't know what I'm gonna sell it to her for yet. We're still at the very beginning stages of talking about it, but it'll be less than what I have into it.
Okay, and then which one came next? Was it the island that came next?
Oh god. I purchased a lot in a short period of time. We should have Clayton here to help because he knows and I don't know. I own a multi-unit in Bath. I think that might have been next, a 3-unit, and then I own the island in Greenville and then the property in Florida. Yeah.
Okay, tell us about the multi-unit and then the Florida one, because it sounds like the island is like a second home, that's just
Island
for
is
you.
just for
It is
yeah, it's not an
yeah, like it will appreciate over time, so it's not a bad investment, but it's not an investment that's, like, actively
yeah,
profiting you
it's
anything right
literally
now, correct?
probably the
Yeah,
only property I purchased other than maybe this property where, like, I bought it with no intention to make money off of it. Like, I
yeah,
just, like, loved it so much. It's just so special up there, but the bath multi-unit is another big project. There was one unit that I gutted to the studs, and now it's been sitting like that for 2 years because I haven't had the money to like put it back in. Again, another horror story with the contractor. It's a really good piece of advice for your listeners to really have a great, strong relationship with a contractor before they buy a renovation project, or they have to know
yeah,
within themselves that they have the time and the self motivation to learn how to do the work themselves. Because I have these great intentions of like, oh, I'm gonna, Clayton and I will learn how to sheetrock and do this stuff, and then like I sort of realized, like as I've gotten older and time has gone by, like not only do I not have the time for that, but like I have no desire to do that. Like I do not want to do that. I do not like doing that. He doesn't like doing that. Like it's just not our thing. So I've learned a lot with like that sort of thing. So either you have to have a really good contractor that you trust, that you know can execute, or you have to know that you can do it yourself. Otherwise, I would suggest not buying a renovation project. Yeah.
yeah. So most of yours have been renovation projects. Have you had any other investors, or has it all just been money that you're saving/coming in from your real
Yeah,
estate
all just
business?
me.
Yeah, and then refinancing houses to take advantage of the equity as it grows and using that to invest in
Yeah.
another one. Can I ask not a financial or logistical question, but like how do you do, and this could just be a personal thing, but as we've invested in more properties comes more responsibility and more fear of something going wrong. How do you deal with the anxiety? Not even the workload, but just the like emotional energy that it or mental energy that it takes to manage, because the difference between real estate and stocks, I feel like, is that they're physical properties with
Yeah.
people that you are then responsible for. That
Yeah.
feels different than just the stock market might crash. which causes anxiety, but it's really just impacting you versus the other humans involved.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I certainly get like, a pretty massive amount of anxiety, especially, and I'm sure you can relate, like if an Airbnb guest is like, you know, I have no hot water, or like something
Yes.
comes up and I stress so bad, and like I know that like they're probably not even as stressed, but I just like
I
am
know.
so concerned about having everyone having the best experience. So I'm really lucky to have a husband that grounds me so much, and his energy is so like, so even keel and so calm. And so I really feed off his energy in those times. I don't think I worry too much about like bigger things happening. Like, my longer term tenants are so chill. All of my longer term tenants, I give a really great deal on rent, and that includes bath. I don't have an Airbnb in Bath. I just have two. It's a 3 unit, but one of the units is sitting unrenovated until I can put more money into it. But
Yep.
the other 2 units are long term rentals. And, I just give them a really good deal. And like, it's okay. Like I have one tenant who wants something done with insulation, so we're going to go over this weekend and do, it's like I don't get anxiety about that. Maybe because it's just my profession of being a realtor, it doesn't stress me as much. It's more
Yeah.
I only really get anxiety about like Airbnb guests if like
Agreed.
something is going wrong like with their stay. Like I wonder if it has to do with like getting reviews. Like
Yes. That's what I was going to say.
so dumb.
With long-term tenants, there's no, like, review for you, and it doesn't mean I try any less hard, but things pop up less often, and it feels like, "Sure, we'll come over tomorrow. We'll get a roof
Right.
guy out there as soon as possible." But it doesn't feel like the same. I also think there's something to it of, like, a long-term tenant has a year to 2 years to summarize their experience there, so one small thing in the course of a
Right.
year or
Right.
2 is not a deal breaker. When someone's there for 2 nights and the power goes out or the hot tub isn't like working or whatever, then it's like, oh, your whole experience is impacted. I only have 2 days to make. I think that's part of it for me
Yeah,
too.
that's totally it. It's definitely it. And they're paying more money for a vacation experience, and then they're, like, in a
Yes.
situation that's not, like, perfect for them.
I think that's another good point. Like, what do you expect from your day to day? You expect that occasionally something will go wrong with a house, but in a vacation, you don't
You
expect
know,
that.
they're
And if it
there
does
for
happen, it's a much bigger
Yeah.
disruption. Yeah.
And like, for my Florida Airbnb, it has a heated pool. It's outside, but like
Yeah.
if my heater stops working and it's like the months that it is now when it only hits 70 in Florida, my pool's heated to 86. Like if it's not heated, they can't use the pool because it's way too cold for them to swim in. And the whole
Right.
reason they rented my Airbnb is because I'm the one with the pool. So
Right. Right.
those ones are so stressful, like, it's crazy.
Yeah.
But, that's why you and I are good Airbnb hosts. Clayton would be a horrible Airbnb host because he's too chill, he's like, "Oh," and maybe,
Sean
like,
too.
he'll be like, "Oh, I'll call someone tomorrow," and I'm like, "What? You need to call right this second, like, what?" So that's why we're good hosts because we have that anxiety, we have that feeling of wanting to make sure that the guests are having a good experience.
That's right. I'll never forget. It feels inevitable that whenever I travel, something goes wrong. But I went to Tokyo with my dad over Thanksgiving a couple years ago. And inevitably, that's when the well pump froze at the cabin in
Oh,
Boone.
god.
But because of the 13-hour time difference, I was setting alarms to wake up in the middle of the night and turning my phone volume on high so that when the plumber called me back to give me an update, it was like 2 in the morning. So I needed to be able to hear it because I couldn't miss it because my guests are only there for the
Right.
week, and it was Thanksgiving,
Oh
right? So you're like,
gosh.
"We need to get this situation solved." We got it solved, everyone was happy, but it was like
That's
it's
stressful.
just it is urgent, and I do think Sean would be like,
We'll
it'll
do
be
this.
fine. I'll
Yeah.
get the message when I wake up."
It's
Yeah,
funny, our men are the
yeah.
same.
And I do need that, but sometimes I'm like, "Actually, this isn't helpful." Like, I've learned over time that my anxiety isn't gonna go away about guests, and I don't think that's a bad thing, to your point. I think it makes me a better host, so Sean always tells me to calm down, and I'm kinda like, I think I'm just worked up enough."
Right. Totally. Like, I got this. Yeah, this is why we're
Yeah,
good. Yeah. And when I
yeah,
say I'm
yeah.
not like that with long-term tenants, I don't totally mean that. Like, if they have no heat or something, I'm still just as on it. But at that
Oh, right,
anxiety
right,
in
right.
my chest is not as big. It's still like, okay, well, I want to get to this, or I could at least get over there and bring them space heaters or whatever it is. Like,
Yep.
they'll see that I'm proactively working on this, but it's different when it's an Airbnb guest.
It is interesting to own long-term rentals in cities where you see a lot of landlords who aren't like that. Because 'cause I've lived in rentals with great landlords, and I've lived in rentals, either apartment complexes or otherwise, where the landlords are not like that, and people have just come to accept it, and my short-term rental owner hat, I think, has made me a better landlord for a long-term rental because I do approach it like everything feels urgent. And even if it doesn't cause the same anxiety for me, I still approach it with the same urgency, which I do think makes sounds like both you and I better
Yeah.
landlords for long-term tenants than other folks I see in the area.
Yeah, I really try. I really do try. And I try to keep my prices really low on purpose, especially because I already have the profession of not only being a real estate agent, but owning a real estate agency. And I just try to combat that in some ways by, charging under market value because I can. Like, I'm not trying to like make a big profit off these people. Like, they're not even paying my mortgage, but it's just like a little
Yeah.
something to like, again, energetically feel like I'm putting some good back out there since I do have short-term rentals, and I am a real estate agent
Yep.
and I am selling, expensive houses to people from all over. I have no problem selling
Yep.
houses to people from out of state. I really hate the stigma around that. And in Maine, it's so strong. I don't know if it is
It is so
really,
strong.
is it there for you too, or is it just Maine? Like in your
Oh,
Carolina?
no, no, no. I feel it in
Maine.
Maine because I'm an
I
out-of-state buyer. I don't think Yeah, I don't think anyone I've met, like, via Cozy Rock has ever made me feel that way, but there's definitely energy within the
I don't
state
know
that
why it's
views
so bad.
locals versus
Yes.
out-of-staters. I know.
The Mainers are such dicks. Like, I can say that because I was born in Lewiston. Like, I am a true blue Mainer. I was born and raised and I've lived here my whole life, but I just hate that. Like, "Oh, you're from away," or "All the out-of-staters are coming in and buying." Like, it's like, how do people not realize that like we're all transplants? Like you don't own this dirt better than anyone, like people are
Yeah.
moving and traveling all the time. I would hate to have someone feel stuck because they have to be in the place where they were born. We're all meant to like move and travel and live different places, and that mentality of like, oh, get out, you're not from here, is just so irritating to me. I hate.
Hmm. It's so interesting because I view it as pride, just like
Well,
they're so
yeah, I mean,
proud of where they're from.
yeah. Right, but you
And
can be proud and
yeah,
not be a jerk to other people and make them feel
yeah,
bad because they wanna live in this beautiful state that's amazing. Like,
true.
I'm
And I
from
will
here, but I'm
say
like, "Come, it's amazing here. Isn't it so
mhm,
cool I've lived
it's
here?
amazing.
Like, come here and live here. It's amazing." Like,
Yeah. I'm actually surprised I haven't gotten more negative energy for being an out-of-stater who built a cabin that then is
Airbnb.
a
Yeah,
short-term
you're like the
rental,
worst.
and I'm talking I know, and I'm talking to people about how amazing Maine is, and I want them to come there, but I have found the opposite from the Mainers that I've connected with through Cozy Rock. I have found, like Mary from Reclaimed Maine sent me a care package the other day with a bunch of Maine stuff in it, and her card said something like, I always love finding other people who love this state as much as I do. And
Yeah,
that's the energy I've gotten from folks is that they can feel that even though I don't live there, I genuinely love this state and want to share that with
yeah.
other people. But I still, if you look at it very logistically, I'm an out of stater who built a cabin, doesn't live there, and like
Airbnbs it.
encourages tourism. Yeah, but have found a lot of support from the Maine community. But I think if it were in northern Maine, I think it would be different. Like Freeport is a very touristy
Yeah, particularly
community and that there's a
Maine.
lot
Yeah,
of yeah. So they understand and have seen it previously, right? Like LL Bean is there and there's all these tourist shops in Freeport
right.
and like
Yeah. I mean, all that stuff, I just don't care. I know I mean, I might get backlash for it. People are so strong about that, but I don't care at all if you're from out of state or if you were born here. I get the pride of being born here, and I'm not trying to devalue that, but
but in northern Maine, it's not even about being born there. It's about do you have 6 generations of family members? I think 6 is the number for you to be a true
what?
Mainer. It has to be maybe it's only 3. I think maybe it's only 3, but it's definitely enough that I've looked back and been like, "Okay, my grandfather was born
I was
here. His
thinking,
parents, does
honestly.
that count?"
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I don't live here, but I have family
Yeah.
heritage. Does that count? But it's like it's deep when you get, into the
It's
more
just
rural
people
areas,
being
I feel like.
territorial.
Yeah. Okay. So tell me, when you think about your portfolio of real
Mhm.
estate, has it been one project at a time building, or is this your full retirement plan? Is it part retirement plan? Is this a short term plan? How do you think of it in terms of like when you ultimately make money off of these properties?
Yeah. I mean, that's a good question. I think when I purchased them, it's been thought of in the sense of like long term. Like I never bought anything to flip it. I've never purchased a property just to resell it in a short period of
Hmm.
time. It's just not how my brain works. I'm like a hoarder with houses. Like I don't want to get rid of any. I just like need to keep them all. So yeah, I think that I've thought in the sense of like, okay, eventually, like, when I'm older, like I'll have these investment properties that either will be worth so much that I can sell and like live on till I die if I'm old, or like keep them as rentals and have the income coming in, that supplemental income to
Yes.
help pay, sustain everything. So pretty much every time
Hmm.
I purchased a property, except for like the island in Greenville. The way that I decide if I'm going to buy it is it's such a simple thing. It's not really crazy numbers. I just look at what the monthly payment's going to be, and then I guess of like how much money I'm going to make on it each month. And if it even just
Hmm.
evens itself out, then I'm like, okay. It's like a
Because you're also getting the appreciation over
Right. It's
time.
like a no-brainer to me that like, and it depends on what it is. If it's just a straight up investment, then I'm hoping to make money off of it every month. But like for my place in Florida,
Yeah.
I bought that because we like to go there in the winter to get out of Maine. Like I said, I was born and raised here, so I'm just like kind of sick of the winters here once we get into like February. So I bought the property so we'd have a place to go. We used to go down and rent Airbnbs for a month and it was so expensive, and I'm just like, why don't I just like own one? So I purchased it. And so that one, I don't care if it just breaks me even. How cool is that? I get to go down for free
Yes.
in the winter, and then I have it, at least covered for me. And that's pretty much what that one's doing there,
Yeah.
roughly. But then my multi units, the one in Bath, I'm not making any money on at all. If anything, I might be losing a small amount. I don't think I am. I think I'm just breaking even because I have that one unit that I still have to renovate.
Right.
Uh,
But once you renovate that one, you will be able to
Yeah,
make.
whatever that rents for, probably like, if it's nice and new, maybe like 1800 for a 3 bedroom or whatever,
Hmm.
then I will make that. That will be the amount that I make off it per month. But yeah, the Portland one's the one that really makes the most money for me. And then hypothetically, the Golden Heart will eventually, once we get.
Okay, tell us about that one, because everyone prior to this has been residential real estate. And this has been the first one that is, I mean, it is residential, but it has commercial potential. So tell us about
Yeah,
that
so
one and how it
I
came
bought
about.
that one just to have and live in and love. And then once I was in it for a little bit, like Clayton and I were like, oh, like we want to get married here. Like we were talking about wanting to get married, and it was such a big, beautiful.
Wait, tell us about the property. Take it back, because I know a lot about the property. I came to visit it. If you follow me on Instagram, you might have seen it. But like, take us back to like, how did you find this house, and then give us a sense of the size and scope of the
Yeah,
property.
it's so insane. The sellers are amazing people. They found me on Instagram and they wanted me to represent them in the sale. They wanted me to be their realtor to sell their property. And so I didn't really do any research on the property. I just was like, "Oh yeah, I'll come over like, right away and like look at it and tell you what I think it's worth." And then I showed up and it was this beautiful like 10,000 square foot like mansion, really is what it is. It's got an indoor heated pool and a library and a gym and an elevator and a tennis court and like two huge outbuildings, and it's on like 55 acres of land. It's so special. So I toured it and my mind was blown. I had never toured anything like that. It truly felt like a private hotel. Like it was so elaborate,
Yes, that is what it
insane.
feels like. In good condition. I think
Right.
that's important, because all of your other investments have required some
Totally.
renovating,
This
and
one
this
did not.
one.
No, it was built in like the late 90s or some built in the 90s and the 2000s. So it was like a newer feeling property. It's like definitely the newest property I've ever purchased. Everything else I own is like super old. And it was incredible. And so I chatted with the sellers and I had the intention of selling it for them. Like I didn't ever think like, oh, I would buy this. But then I brought Clayton through it because we were going to do some light staging. The sellers had already moved away, so it was totally empty. And I was just going to stage a couple of the rooms to give prospective buyers a place to sit down because oftentimes they want to sit in the space and talk it out. So I was like, oh, I'll just put like a couch in here or whatever. So I brought Clayton over to stage it. And at the time we had been touring wedding venues and he walked through it and he was just like his eyes, like, and he's really set again, even very even keel person. So
Mhm.
to see him so like, oh my God, wow, oh wow. Like I was like, okay, like he was so into it. And then he was like, Mandy, we need to get married here. Like this place is perfect for like for a wedding. Like it's so lovely. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's so crazy. But like you are also right. And
Okay,
yeah,
question. If you had not been touring wedding venues, do you think you would have seen the same thing in this property?
I think I probably would have thought like, oh, this should be something bigger than just a private residence. Like it almost
Yeah.
felt like a disservice that just like one family was living in it. Like it was like it
Yes.
felt like it should be way grander than that. But I don't know. I don't think it would have manifested with that very specific thought. I hard to say.
Yeah.
It's just that we had wedding in our brain because we were getting
Yep.
married. And so then I spoke to the owner and I was like, listen, like, and I was very upfront. I was like, we can list it on the public market at this like higher price. And it might take a little bit to sell because usually the high end properties, they don't fly. They sit for a little bit because it's a very niche like thing. I was like,
Yes.
or for this price, I'll buy it from you as a private sale and we can close in 3 weeks. And they decided to go with the cheaper, like close quickly. They really wanted to get out, like they, just had to move on for personal reasons. So they preferred to have that be the way that worked best for them, right? So they chose that, and then I purchased it really fast, and it was crazy. And I ended up accidentally closing on my birthday, which felt like very gluttonous to buy a mansion on my birthday. It sounds so ridiculous. And it was not, I actually didn't want to close on my birthday because I was like, this is like too embarrassing feeling, but it just happened. They were like, this is the only day we can close. And I'm like, cool, okay. So we bought it on September.
Where do you think that feeling comes from? Because there's another world in which you could be like, "Damn, I'm killing it. I bought this giant mansion on my birthday, like milestone achieved." I'm curious where that feeling came from.
Yeah, that's very interesting. That's now we turn into a therapy session. I think I struggled because I also own a real estate agency and it just, it's like at that time that was my seventh property purchase and it just it starts feeling a little like gluttonous, like you know a little too baller, I guess. Is that a thing? Can you be too baller?
I don't know. That's the question. I've been listening a lot to the Financial Feminist podcast, which I love. And her and some of the people she has on just own like this is actually how women
Yeah,
rise is like we have to make money and we need to stop being embarrassed about it or ashamed of it or feel like we have to say we're doing things for reasons other than money. I mean, if it's true that you are, that's fine, but it's also equally okay to be like, no, I want to make a lot of money and be secure in my
yeah.
life.
I mean, when you say that, like, it does make me want to like put my shoulders back and be like, yeah, I'm a boss ass babe doing all this by myself. Like, I made all this money myself. It wasn't inherited to me. My family didn't own a real estate agency that just was passed down. Like, I grew it from the ground up.
That's
I
right.
come from a poor family. I was raised very modestly in Maine. Like, so when I think about those things and I think of everything that I manifested, I do feel really proud about it. You're right. So thank you for
You
checking me
should.
on that. But it's just at some point I'm like, gosh, like, I don't, when I had like four properties, I'd be like, yeah, and I'm a real estate investor and I own. And now that I'm at like eight, I'm like, I feel like I am more shy about it now. I don't know. Maybe I shouldn't be.
I
I,
agree. I feel similarly, and I only own I'm not even sure how many I own
yeah,
right now. I guess I own, what, 5
yeah,
houses, 1 that I live in, and then 4 that are investments, and I feel the same way. Like, when I had 1 cabin, I was, like, not afraid to talk about my awesome cabin because I was
yeah,
just like it was just my
yeah,
happy place, you know? And now that it's more, I feel a sense of, like, "Oh, I can't talk about all of them at once. I need to pick in a conversation with someone
which,
which of
yeah,
these might come up," and that's the only one that I talk
yeah.
about.
Yeah, it's interesting. It is really interesting. And there's so many things we could dive into of like why do we feel insecure about that? And like if we were a man, would we feel insecure about that? I don't know.
I
I
don't
don't
think we
know.
would. I do feel like there's a lot of gender at play personally. I remember I've talked to Sean about this when I was dating. There was a period in my life when I was dating and I owned 2 businesses and I owned the house that I lived in and I owned 1 cabin. And I could not go on dates and talk about all of that. It was so apparent how most people that I was dating did not have an appreciation for that. In fact, were like, I don't like didn't like it. So I had to like consciously play it down.
Interesting.
And on my dating profile, I own a video production company, but my occupation says storyteller. And Sean said when we first matched on Tinder that he thought I was a puppeteer who went into libraries and children's classrooms and told stories using
That's
puppets.
amazing. That's so fun.
But I wonder, like, would he have wanted to go out in the same way if I was like entrepreneur, business owner, real estate investor, which is like not how I viewed myself,
Yeah.
but would that have felt
And
different?
I'm in the same boat because even still saying entrepreneur, I'm like, oh, I guess I am. But
Totally, you
it's
totally
just so
are.
funny how I don't. To me, it's always just one foot in front of the other. So it's like an opportunity
Me
presents
too.
itself. Do the numbers work? Am I pre-approved to be able to buy it? Do I feel safe
Yep.
carrying it? If the answer is yes, I just do it. And that's just happened so many times now. But I've never in my it's never come from a place of ego of like, oh, I want to be this big. Even owning my own real estate agency was kind of an accident. Like I was working for another agency, but I just couldn't find one that fit my vibe. I wanted something more artsy and liberal and interesting, and that didn't exist. Everything was so boring and vanilla and glamour shot photos with the dog, and I just couldn't deal with any of it. So that's why I learned how to start my own agency and did. And so it's just
Yep.
it's like all these things happen to me, which yes, it's like, oh, I guess she is a boss lady or whatever, but it wasn't me doing it with the intention of being a boss lady. It was just like, this is what I need and it doesn't exist. So I'm going to do it. And then all these other agents
Yes.
came to me saying, I see what you're doing and this is also what I want. Can I join you? And then it was like, and now I have 10 agents and, like, so it just kind of happens. It's like, I sort of, not to get too hippie, but I feel like when you're walking in the right path, the universe kind of opens up to like help flow with you if that's what
Mhm.
you're meant to do. Like, oftentimes if things are like hitting too many walls, and I take that as like a sign. But I feel like with all of these choices that I've made in my life, it's all happened like very naturally and organically. Like,
Yeah, I feel very similarly just about the real estate of it's never been a big plan to invest in real estate. It was
yeah,
more, well, I have always dreamed of owning a cabin. I think I can make this happen sooner if I rent it. It was purely financial. And then I started renting it and was like, I love sharing this space
yes,
with other people. I love hearing about the memories that they're making there, the experiences they're having. Like they love it as much as I do. That felt really good. Then it was like, okay, maybe I can build one and like really curate it for a specific experience. Okay, let's try that. Okay, that worked. Should we do it
yeah,
again? Like, what makes sense? But yet I listen to these. I don't listen to them anymore because they're not good for me. But I did used to listen to like either short term rental or real estate investing podcasts where they'd interview dudes, and the energy of these young guys investing in real estate felt so
so
different. It
different.
was very
Yeah,
calculated. And sometimes it's like, okay, I'm investing in storage units because this is the most boring, but the most profitable like investment that I can make in a space. And I'm just like, wow, like good for you. You've seen the financial opportunity and you're making life
right.
possible for you. But in my mind, I'm like, oh, that's purely profit driven. That doesn't sound
Yeah,
fun or I don't know. It just
yeah.
like has never it feels like a very different energy.
Agree. Yeah, it's so true. It's so interesting to think about, like, and not to just really focus too much on gender, but it's true. There's two different types of energies. More like our type, which is about like the experience, and it's way more like personal and emotional, and all those lovely, wonderful things that we bring. And
Mhm.
then I have many real estate investors in my business who are just like, do the numbers work? What's this figure? Da da da
Yeah.
da. okay, it's a yes. Like it's like
Yeah.
it's so unemotional.
And I don't think like to be clear, I don't think there's a right or wrong way. Obviously, I think there's a right or wrong way for me,
Right.
and I don't think I could ever do that. The anxiety wouldn't be worth it. The stresses that come along with owning property wouldn't be worth it if it was a space that didn't offer me some emotional reward,
Right.
right? I know intimately the anxiety that I get from owning property that is different than like stocks investment. So it has to have that emotional payoff, I
True.
think. Okay, I wanna go back to the swan. I wanna talk about the numbers a little bit depending what you're
Okay.
comfortable with, but I'd love to know what your monthly payment is and then how this makes sense, and describe okay, I've been there, and it's like it's hard to explain how it's like an on-site you can have the
Oh, you're talking about the
ceremony, the
Golden Heart.
reception, the cocktail hour. Yeah, the Golden Heart. Did I say
Yeah,
the
it's
Swan?
okay. Yeah,
I meant the
I
Golden
know. I
Heart.
name all my buildings.
I love it. I love it. You can have all of these things in one place and you can sleep over 30 people. So literally for small intimate weddings, and then even if you had 150 people, the fact that 30 your closest friends and family could all stay on
Right.
site is like pretty unique.
It's so unique. I haven't found anything like it yet. So it's just it felt like such an amazing opportunity to to offer it. It just made so much sense. So there's this big barn and that's what we're using as the reception hall and there's this other huge building with like gorgeous ornate woodworking and radiant heat flooring and that's the dance hall or the ceremony spot if it's raining that day and then we've got this beautiful lawn with this really ancient apple tree and willow tree and this beautiful pond and I have the most gorgeous like wedding arch that was made for me by the same contractor who did work at the Swan, Lucas Scarborough. There's a little plug for him.
Uh,
Phenomenal craftsman woodworker and he made this like stunning arch for me, which actually the logo of the Golden Heart is like a little play off of that arch that he made because it's just so beautiful. So yeah, it's just like such an amazing spot. And then the main house, like I said, is so huge. So it's just such a great opportunity and such a unique opportunity. Normally it's like, you know, in Maine, there's like the barn wedding vibe or whatever, but it doesn't have like the house. Or if it does have a house, it's like an old farmhouse that maybe sleeps six or something, you know, like this is a gigantic estate that like you can stay for the whole weekend and have your entire like family there with you. It's not like everyone's at different hotels and then they all come together.
right.
Like that is where you're all staying. So when Clayton and I got married, his whole family's from Texas and we were able to house them all for like 4 or 5 nights. And I can't even explain like that is what made our wedding getting to every day like be with them and go swimming in the pool. We had activities, the tennis
Yes.
court and
Yes.
walking in the woods and like you know we had all these wonderful things to do there and just to all be together for that many days that was by far what was most special.
And I have to say from a business perspective, like there's a lot of money in weddings. I want to say like I think we had talked about a venue like this could bring in somewhere between 15 to 30K per
Yeah.
weekend. So then you multiply that by during wedding season or even other the thing is it also makes a perfect off-season venue because everything could be inside. I went into the dance hall and my first thought was I actually want to get married in
I
here.
know.
It has this like beautiful wood ceiling as if I'm not already married, but like I would have wanted to get married there. I could imagine it full of candles and just being so cozy for a winter wedding. But then the other piece is with wedding venues, often you're booking on weekends, but then you're not during the week. And this is the perfect like retreat location as well. Like you could host so much more than just weddings there.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, we're hosting right now. We're hosting family gatherings a lot. Just like groups of people, friends gatherings we're hosting. Clayton just had a spiritual men's like retreat this past weekend that was like the best experience of everyone's lives. They loved it so much. So,
Oh,
yeah, we're
good.
definitely opening it up to other things too.
Would you be willing to share your monthly overhead for the property versus like what the potential revenue is for it?
It's really high. It's it's definitely the riskiest thing that I've done. I don't have all the exact numbers, but I'm like right now I'm like over 15,000 a month. It's
Yeah.
so
Okay, but then you think about the potential. So yes, so riskiest you've ever done, but I also think this goes to
could be the
it
biggest
speaks a little
reward. Yeah.
that's right. And sometimes you're at the stage I think in your investing where
Right.
you've proven that you can do these smaller investments like it's time. It's time to I don't
Jump
know
bigger.
if
Yeah,
level
it's
up is the right
definitely the
word, but
scariest.
yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely the scariest one I've done for sure, just because of how high the overhead is. Like,
Yeah.
and up until very recently had $0 coming in for over a year. I'm covering it for over a
Right.
year with no money coming in. And then not just that monthly cost, which is more than what I told you, but somewhere in that range. But I also spent, well over $100,000 just furnishing it. Like, it
Yeah.
was such a massive property to furnish, and I'm still not even totally done. I'm just like at the bare minimum of it being acceptable, like beds in the room,
Yep.
nightstands. Like, I still have so much more I want to do over time. Like when we were together and talk about, oh, like we can wallpaper this room or do this thing. Like, there's so much potential to do so much more, but it's just so massive. Everything that big, and right now Clayton and I are cleaning it ourselves in the few get-togethers that we've had there of just like, family gatherings. And when I do find a cleaner, I don't even know how much they're going to charge me for property.
I
You
know.
know?
I can't imagine.
Yeah. So
And like pool maintenance, do you have someone who comes to do the pool
the pool
maintenance?
maintenance is crazy. And, like there are 3 boilers on the property. So every time I need to like have, like your yearly service, well, I'm doing three times over, like I'm
Yeah.
filling up the oil tanks, the 3 oil tanks monthly, and the
Oh my
1,000
God. I
gallons
can't
of
imagine
main
that
tank
cost.
monthly, and the
Yeah.
electric is off the charts. The electric is like over $1,500 a month. Like, it's just because it's so big, everything is
Yeah.
so expensive. But because it's so big, that's why it's so appealing. So it's like,
Right.
yeah,
Oh my God. My big picture brain could not stop dreaming while I was there. It just even like people have messaged me a lot about like, oh, are we ever gonna do like a cabin culture retreat or like
yeah,
something where cabin owners can meet in real life? And my brain again is always like, yes, we should do that. I'm an extrovert
right,
and I love the idea of meeting all these people in real life and I love this community. And also, I'm like, where would we do that? There's no cabin. All the cabins I know sleep like 6 to
right,
10 at most. And then I saw your place and I was like, this isn't a cabin, but we could fit 30 people here.
mhm,
Is this where we do it?
yeah,
So stay tuned. But I think there's so much potential. Yoga retreats, there's that huge dance
right,
hall there's
yeah.
just so much potential.
It's like any large gathering, it's perfect.
Yeah.
Corporate. I even have a friend who like does a lot of reality TV and stuff, and she's like, I could have famous chefs just come and we could film an episode in this kitchen. Like, there's
Oh my
so much
God.
opportunity. It's such like an executive, like fancy feeling property, and it's also just so cool because it's so big. It just can sleep so
Yeah,
many people comfortably. It's not like you're all packed in either. Like, you're all. It's like very
that's right.
spacious.
Oh, there's like 4 floors, and I love with an elevator, even
Yeah.
better. But what I love, I think maybe the most, I love a lot about it, but I love doing the design process. I always need a project to like, to take something and make it even better just through paint and furniture and lighting and rugs. I'm not great at it. I always work with interior designers, but I love that. And you can do, someone who's not very handy, can do a lot of that stuff myself,
Yeah.
right? And this one is so usable, but like you were saying, like some of, it could use some decor
Yeah.
updating if you want to. Like actually most people who come to a wedding don't care what wallpaper is on their room, but then if and when you have the money and time, you can update room by room and have projects for like the next however many years, which to
Yeah.
me is so exciting of just like great, you can use it. It's fully functional. It's great right now and yet there's still chances to make it better
Better.
over time, which
Mhm.
feels so fun.
Yeah, it's true.
Not like the Swan where you have to like actually do like work to even get it up and
Right.
running. This one is already there.
Yes, it's all just yes, totally. You're absolutely right. It's way more attainable. So I guess that's a good thing, if any listeners are thinking about like, oh, what investment should I buy? That's the gauge right there. Do you do something crazy that needs like structural sheetrock, framing 2x4s, plumbing, electrical? Like, do you have the skill set for that or know the right people? Or are you more of like, I can take, just like a boring ranch or something, but like I can do like
Yes.
wallpaper and paint and cool light fixtures, but like not
Yep. Yep.
like there's different gauges of like renovation projects for sure.
Yeah. And you and I both dove in to I think the deep end with our first ones, because mine was a total gut job. It had been abandoned for years. It required so much work. And I look back and I'm like, how did I think I could do that? And I did pull it off. But to your point, there's also a lot of things. We're getting ready to sell that one. And there's like a lot of work that I need to like do right now. Not the functional stuff, but just the aesthetics, things that were fine for me to live there. But that
Right.
was a lot of work and I made a lot of mistakes. And I also made the mistake of paying someone up front and got screwed over by a contractor. So it's like, if you're at the beginning and you have experience with those things and you feel comfortable dealing with a contractor, or does it make more sense to invest in something that's turnkey and ready to rent right away?
Right.
And you can still make money off of that. It's just different. It's a
Right.
different experience and different
Right.
returns.
And it also depends on like how long you're holding it for.
Yeah. And if it's, I think both of us have invested a lot in properties that we don't necessarily, we're not flipping it. We're not thinking about selling it right away. So it is a long term game. And so you don't necessarily need to, at least for me, it wasn't like I necessarily needed to make a lot of money right up front. But that's why I started Airbnb in my guest room when I lived in that house, because
Mhm.
I've never once paid a mortgage payment on that house since I lived in it with roommates and Airbnb and then tenants after I left. So when I do sell it, it's all the money, like I basically have never made a mortgage payment on that
Right.
house. So the profit at the end of it is a lot better. Anyway, there's a lot of different ways to approach this. I really appreciate talking about it with you
Yeah.
because I feel like we have similar paths. And I also think, while it would make sense to probably interview a real estate investor who like is really dialed into all the
Yeah,
numbers,
maybe you should do
I
that
have
one
only
for
gotten
me. It would be so funny to see how different it is.
yeah. I mean, and I started like you, I've gotten really dialed into the numbers
Yeah.
now as we added properties, but it's mostly just because I like that. I like the meticulousness of studying them at the end of the month and
Yeah,
seeing
you're
what
way
I can
more
tweak to make it
yes,
better.
totally. And, like,
I
hypothesizing the cost of every expense and every potential thing. I've had a lot of clients like that in my real estate career, and I
yeah,
totally respect it, but to me, it's like, like, I, like, don't wanna, like, factor in the cost of a hypothetical repair and all that,
I know.
it's just not how
Such a buzzkill.
yeah, totally.
Enneagram 7s do not like that.
That's right. That's right.
Now that I know you're a 7. Remind people where they can find you and where they can find information about the Golden Heart Estate should they be getting married, looking to host a retreat, or a family reunion, any of the fun things that people might want to check out
Yeah, I
for.
mean, it's so easy. It's just thegoldenheartestate.com, or my Instagram, which I'm still working on being more active on, is just the Golden Heart Estate.
Mandy, thanks for joining me
Yes.
again. This was
So good to
lovely.
see you, Janet.
Thanks so much for joining us. And if you liked what you heard, feel free to leave us a 5-star rating on Spotify or share some of your favorite parts over on Apple Podcast. If you have feedback or suggestions for the future, you can also find me on Instagram at Cozy Rock Cabin. Looking forward to next week.